Hello everybody, I am Tom and you are watching my build video for Baruuk. Baruuk is interesting. First things first, I'll go over his abilities, because his abilities are probably the most interesting thing. The first three of these are completely and utterly defensive abilities, which is very strange, but we'll go with it. We start off with Elude, where he dodges all incoming projectiles, but only while not attacking. You can use it again and it will deactivate it. It's a toggleable ability. You can turn it on and off. It's worth noting it says dodge all incoming projectiles. From my testing, it works with melee attacks as well. So if a butcher's coming whacking at you, if you just stand there, that counts as a projectile, I suppose? I think the only thing that hits him during this is explosion damage from bombards. I'm pretty sure still hit him. Is the only thing that still hits him. But with my current build, he has 360 degrees of safety, essentially, so he can get hit from anywhere, and he's perfectly fine. And it costs about 2.13 energy per second to keep it active. His second ability is Lull. A calming wave slows enemies until they fall into a slumber. Enemies woken by damage will be confused and disorientated. Short-term amnesia means all waking enemies forget anything that happened before the lull. So essentially it puts them back into their neutral state, so they're not active after they come back. Current build, like a 30-second sleep duration. It takes about 7 and a bit seconds for it to actually fully cast, and it's got a radius of about 50 meters. Honestly, I don't find myself using this ability pretty much at all, because it's pretty crap as far as actual control purposes go. I mean, I suppose maybe if you're doing an interception it could come in useful, but I'll show that later in the actual test. Desolate Hands is his third ability. You summon a bevy of orbiting daggers that seek out enemy guns, destroying them with small explosions, combined with Loot to double the range. Now this ability, what it doesn't actually say is it actually gives you 90% damage reduction, which is kind of a big thing when you think about it. 90% damage reduction is pretty damn good. Granted, he can give himself 100% damage reduction by putting a Loot on, but as long as those daggers are floating around you, you have 90% damage reduction, which is really good. That includes when you're attacking, so you can actually attack things and have 90% damage reduction. So it's actually a pretty good idea to have this up as much as possible. Currently, I have a 13 meter radius. The problem with this is, if I wanted the actual, the best part about that ability is the damage reduction. So the problem you run into is the fact that all your daggers shoot off. If you have a big enough range to have Elude work very well, to have 360 degrees on Elude, it means that your radius on Desolate Hands is fairly big, so your daggers fly off almost immediately, and then you don't have damage reduction, so it's... You destroy some weapons, I suppose, but it's not that useful. And then, finally, Serene Storm. It's his, what they call Exalted weapon, where he does a bunch of punches, and they do, sort of the Buddha air palm in the distance. And that has 535 damage and 40% damage reduction while you're in that as well. It's worth noting. But for the actual flavor text, it's... With his restraint eroded, Baruuk commands the desert wind to deliver powerful radial strikes with his fists and feet. Each moment commanding the storm restores his restraint. So essentially, his first three abilities will deteriorate his restraint, and then after, you can then use that built-down restraint to then use Serene Storm, which explains in his passive, each projectile dodge, each enemy lulled or disarmed, erodes Baruuk's restraint and fuels the storm within. As Baruuk's restraint is diminished, he becomes more resistant to damage. So there's that. As for the actual build... This is a 2-former, well, it's technically a 5-former build because I did 2-former on his Exalted weapon, but that's actually, the Exalted weapon's pretty easy to level. Honestly, the main investment of former is in him, because he is actually really hard to level because he can't do much damage with most of his abilities. But I have Energy Siphon on him. The reason I have Energy Siphon is I'm running 75% efficiency, which you can run into some problems with that. You generally don't want to drop below 100% efficiency, but I wanted the range and the strength, essentially. We got Power Drift, which is ability strength. Also, chance to resist knockdown, which is nice, I suppose, but it's there for the ability strength. Transient Fortitude, once again, ability strength. That tanks his duration a bit, but we've counteracted that with other duration mods, essentially. Overextended, that's plus 90% ability range, lowers the strength a bit. Umbrella Intensify, because I can fit Umbrella Intensify. Regular Intensify works perfect here. Granted, it's worth noting that I only have a rank 9 Umbrella Intensify. I would actually have to do another former if this was rank 10, but I haven't been bothered to farm the Endo to actually get Umbrella Intensify up to rank 10, so worked out kinda well. Blind Rage, ability strength, get rid of some efficiency. That's where that 75 comes from. Narrow-minded, granted, also this is a rank 4 Blind Rage. I actually need to get another one and max it out for a couple of other builds, but for this one here, 45 ability strength, still nothing to scoff at. Now Reminded ups the ability duration and lowers the range a bit. Augur Reach, ability range. Stretch, ability range. Augur Secrets, ability strength. So essentially here this ability strength is built up for the purpose of getting his 4 to do more damage. The ability range, as long as you can hit the 200% mark, you'll have 360 degrees of invulnerability range on his 1, which is what you probably want. I was doing some testing on getting like sort of just under that, but it's really not viable because the amount, most of the time, for like a melee attack for instance, if a melee attack will go through you, and unless you have 360 degrees of protection there, it will hit the hitbox behind you even if they're attacking you from the front. So you essentially need that 200% ability range. And the duration is there because it will actually lower the cost per second for a lewd. It's that thing that they do with quite a few Warframes where it's a mixture of duration and efficiency, which actually determines the efficiency of the cost per second for those kind of abilities. So this is the main build for him. I have Arcane Aegis on him because Arcane Aegis is quite good on anything that has kind of defensive capabilities. Essentially what Arcane Aegis does is when you get damage, there's a chance that you just stack shields a lot. So currently it's 6% chance, and you get 60 shields a second for 20 seconds, which is a lot of shield recovery. You notice I don't actually have any survivability mods on him. He doesn't really need them because he can just go invulnerable whenever he wants. I also have Arcane Consequence because Arcane Consequence is nice. And the second build I have for him is the Fishing build. I have Firewalker on this, which makes him faster. Corrosive Projection, you could put anything you want on here in all honesty. But this one has, I won't go over all the mods here because this is kind of just a silly build, but it has a very high duration and efficiency, and the range once again is above 200. So essentially, the idea of this build is that you just cast a lewd, it costs you next to no energy, and you can sit there fishing and no one will bother you because they'll try and attack you and nothing happens and you can just keep fishing. It's pretty much entirely what that's for. But, to take this into a test, I'm going to go into level 50 enemies? Sure. So let's simulate that. Get some energy. You hit one, and you can see that restraint down in the bottom right. It's slowly getting whittled down as I'm taking hits. You notice I'm not taking any damage here as well. And the reason I'm not taking any damage is because I have one active, if that's unclear. Also, I can hit 3. It'll put these daggers around me. Which if I go... Let's go to these... Yeah, there you go. That bombard there doesn't have his bombard rockets anymore. They're all attacking me with sheaves. But you can see now that my restraint is all the way down. Granted, I don't have a lot of energy, which is the biggest problem you run into with him, in all honesty. With this build, efficiency kind of gets tanked a bit. But if we cast 4... I fell off the edge. Not a good idea. Whoop. I need some more energy. Your 4 doesn't cost any energy, but you'll notice as I'm in my 4... I think I've killed pretty much everybody at this point. You'll notice the restraint is slowly ticking back up. Ever so slowly, but it's slowly going further and further up and up and up. And given enough time, that will just go all the way up again, and then you won't be able to use your 4. Also, I can turn my 1 off now. So, essentially the way I'm using him currently, and I fiddled around a lot on trying to look at ways to use him. I was looking at just using his 3 as like a defensive thing, and then just relying entirely on guns, and doing a whole lot of other stuff. But I find the easiest way to use him is to use his 1, and then just stand in the middle of a bunch of enemies until your restraint is all the way gone, and then you can use Serene Storm to kill a bunch of enemies. And then when you get a lull in enemies, you just turn your Serene Storm off, wait until there's more enemies, take a bunch of hits with a lewd, get your restraint down again, turn Serene Storm back on. And Serene Storm doesn't do horrible damage with what I've got at the moment. The Desert Wind, by the way, is this build here, which is a 3-former build, But this is prime pressure point. You can just use regular pressure point if you don't have prime pressure point, obviously. I have sacrificial steel in here because it's got high critical chance, and the base critical chance on this is pretty damn good. I think it's like 50%. So you can get sacrificial steel, which gives you 80%. Once again, you could just use true steel if you don't have that. It gives you 60 rather than 80. This is just better, and I can fit it, so I do. Once again, rank 9, not rank 10. If it was rank 10, I would need another former. Which just worked out kind of well on both of those counts. Organ Shatter gives you critical damage. So my critical damage is actually 5 times multiplier, which you're getting most of the time. Gladiator Might, more critical damage. Prime Fever Strike, because it's Prime Fever Strike, you can get a lot of damage out of that. North Wind for the cold, and Collision Force for impact, because all of the damage of this is actually impact by base. If I got rid of these elemental mods, it would just be all impact damage. And finally I have Berserk on here, just you're getting criticals, you want your attack speed up, and it does affect his attack speed. So you noticed I was actually getting faster as I was fighting in my 4. So that's what that's for. But you notice 2 of his abilities to me seem... I didn't even show off his 2 because I find it that useless, but his 2, he does that, and then enemies will fall asleep. In fact, I'll show it with the enemies, why not? I'll simulate the level 50 again. Hit his 1, makes him invulnerable, and then we hit Serene Storm. They slow down a bit until they're asleep. And it's got a fairly good range on it. Like you notice, like the guy down here is asleep. And everyone stays asleep for a fairly long time, so you can... Like it's effective, but it just... Like... Put them all to sleep again. I mean... And that's what you do, essentially. So, like, if you like, you can use this too. It works. The problem being is you get hit by a shotgun, you die. Because using his abilities counts as attacking. It's worth noting. So if you have your 1-up, that's nice. But if you use your 2, I'll see if I can do it here. He fell asleep before he could attack me. You have a Vectus Prime with a few former in it. It does some work. But... So I suppose there is a few ways you can use him with this build. But the way I tend to use him is I just make myself invulnerable, take a bunch of hits, and then use my 4. It's pretty much how I've been doing it thus far. And finally, what I want to show off is how he does against higher level enemies. Granted, this is a simulacrum, so it's not the same necessarily as showing like high level enemies in... Oh, give me a second. Kill all those enemies. Thank you. So I'll simulate high level, put on a lewd. Get these guys to attack me. I'll hit 3. Helo's probably gonna die. You'll notice when the enemies are this high, you lose restraint quickly as well, which is worth noting. But you just stand here and get clusterfucked. It's pretty much the way to go, and then once your restraint is gone, hit 4. Hit 3 to get 90% damage reduction. Honestly, you can turn your 1 off at that point, because you're actually attacking, so it's kind of pointless. After these healers are dead. It's not insignificant damage. And if you wanted, like against these, you notice it takes out the corpus units a lot easier. If you wanted to take out Grenier better, you could put corrosive damage on your Desert Wind. But it can take out fairly high level enemies pretty easily. Like level 150 enemies. I think they were level 140. I'm not quite high enough mastery rank to get level 150 enemies, unfortunately. But it does the job. Essentially. Took me a while to get used to him, but now that I know how to use him, he's alright. I mean, he's alright. I do kind of like his playstyle, but it is very different to most other Warframes. But that's how I build him and that's how I use him. So once again, anyone has any critiques and or suggestions about how to make him better, let me know in the comments. But thanks for watching and I shall see you next time, where we'll be taking on Excalibur. I was planning on taking on Excalibur this time, but Baruuk got released, so I wanted to go backwards and actually do the ones that I missed alphabetically, so Baruuk was here. But Excalibur next time. Thanks for watching and I shall see you next time.